Hey, what's up guys? In this video we're going to be doing a PC build. This will be a start to finish build, so hopefully you guys enjoy this video. Let's get right on to the build. Okay, so here are all the parts that we're going to be working with today for this build. Let's start with the motherboard. This is a Asus P8H77M motherboard. And for the CPU we have an Intel Core i7-2600. It's running at 3.4 gigahertz. For the memory, we're going to be installing two 4GB sticks, a total of 8 of G.Skill Sniper 1600 MHz memory, and we're going to be cooling that CPU with a deep cool Maelstrom 240T all-in-one closed-loop liquid cooling system. We're going to be using an EVGA GeForce GTX 960 ACX 2.0 card for this build, and a storage drive, a 128GB OCZ Agility 4 SSD. We're going to be powering all of that with a EVGA 600-watt power supply and house it inside the Corsair Air 240 case. So that was all the parts that we're going to be using. Now let's start with the build. We'll start with prepping the motherboard. Okay, so here in front of us we have the three components we're going to start working with: the motherboard, the RAM, and the CPU. We're going to start with the CPU, but one thing I do want to mention is when you are working with a motherboard or anything with bare components such as the RAM, motherboard, or video card, it is a good idea to have an anti-static wrist strap on. So I have one on here so I'm protected from static while I am handling these parts. But let's continue with the CPU installation. Here on the motherboard, here's the CPU socket, and right beside that is a retaining arm that will release. You just pull it towards the RAM slots and then lift it back, and the socket cover will come up with it. And now we'll take our CPU and we'll line up the notches on the side of the CPU with the notches on the socket, so you can see them here. And then just place the CPU into the socket. It just sits in place just like that. Then take the socket cover, put it right underneath that screw on the motherboard, and then push down on the retaining arm and hook it underneath this piece of metal, and there we go, the CPU is now installed. Now we'll move on to the RAM. So here we have a dual channel configuration of this memory. We're going to be installing the memory into these two black slots on this motherboard. This is A1 and this is A2, and the blue slots are B1 and B2. So we'll take our first stick of memory, and the only important thing you really need to keep in mind here when installing memory, you need to line up the notch that is on the memory and with the notch on the motherboard. So once it's lined up, just place it into the guides on the side and then push down one side and push in the other side. It clicks in place as you heard. Then you take your other stick and do the exact same. Make sure it is oriented properly. Push it down into the guides and then push it into place. And there we go, the RAM is installed and also the CPU. Now we're going to move on to the power supply installation into the case. So let's put the case on the table and the power supply. Okay, so now we're going to do the power supply installation. So we have the power supply here, and this is an EVGA 600 watt. Drop it into place just like that into the case and push it up against the back. I want to have the fan facing this direction because when the side panel is on, there is a filter and like basically a screen so the air can come in through the back panel of the case and exhaust out of here from the power supply. So there we go, the power supply is dropped into place. Now we're going to change camera angles to show you how to install the screws to secure the power supply into the case. So we got one of the screws right here, and we also have a Phillips screwdriver. Go ahead and put one of the screws on the end of the screwdriver and then just thread it into place into the back of the power supply. It doesn't need to be on super tight, it just needs to be snug. Take your second screw and install it into an opposite corner. So once you have your four installed, go ahead and check all of them again, just make sure they're all tight. And there we go, your power supply is installed into the case. Let's move on to installing the SSD into the case. Okay, so now that the power supply is successfully installed, let's go ahead and install the SSD into the Corsair Air 240 case. You'll have to remove this top piece on the case, so we'll remove the two screws that are on the top. Once those are removed, take the top piece and just slide it back a little bit, and it just comes off really simply. Now we're going to take out one of the bays on the top of the case. We'll take our SSD and we're going to orient it so the connections are going into the case, so that way they're facing the bottom of the case. We'll put it into this toolless bay. We'll line up the pins in the holes of the SSD, just like that. Push it together, make sure it's in. Now you can take your SSD and just drop it back into place like that. Take the front or the top cover, put it into the guides and just slide it forward. Take your two thumb screws and just install them onto the back of the top panel to hold it in place. And there we go, we have a drive installed, a SSD installed to the Corsair Air 240 case. Now let's move on to the motherboard installation. Okay, so the first thing we'll do for the motherboard installation is remove the front side panel. As you can see, this case has a large window on it. All you do for the side panel is you just back off the 2 thumb screws on the side and then remove the panel. Now that the panel is removed, let's go ahead and install the I/O shield into the back of the case. The I/O shield is installed into this cutout here. We'll zoom in on it here now. So here we have the I/O shield for this motherboard, and we're going to take the I/O shield and just place it into the back of the case, and we're going to put the PS2 port at the top and the audio ports at the bottom. That is how the I/O shield is installed into this case, and then push it into place. It just snaps into place really simply. Just push in every corner and try to hold the side of the case in place while you are doing it. That way it doesn't bend the case when you are pushing on it. Sometimes it will require a little bit more pressure to install it, but that's how you install it into the case. Now let's install the motherboard. Okay, so once the I/O shield is installed, before we install the motherboard, we'll check another thing, which is how many standoffs do you have installed in the case. So we have 3 standoffs here at the top, we got 3 in the middle, and then 2 at the very bottom. This will secure the motherboard into place, but make sure that you have the correct standoffs installed. Take your motherboard and place it into the inside of the case. And what you'll do is you'll lift it up a little bit more and then push it over towards the I/O shield. And there we go, now it's seated in place. And it's good to have your case flat down when you're doing this. That way it makes your installation go way quicker and way easier. Go ahead and take the screws for the motherboard and install each one of them. So we got 1 here, like 3 in the middle, 3 at the top, and then 2 at the bottom. We got a total of 8 screws, so we'll go ahead and install those. Okay, so now we're in the back of the case again, and we're going to remove the 3.5-inch drive bays that are in place here. So as you can see right here at the back, there's a thumb screw. You're going to want to have to back that off first. That way we can remove this bay. Once you've done that, now we're going to turn this case a little bit. And here at the back of the case, you can see another thumb screw. It is right here. I'm going to back that off a little bit, so that way this cover can come out. And now we can take these 3.5-inch drive bays and remove them once those 2 screws are removed. So now you can take this bay and just pull it out like that. Okay, so we got our mounting hardware here for our liquid cooler, and this is the back plate, and we also have 4 screws that are going to be installed to the back plate, and they're going to be secured in place with these 4 pieces of plastic that will go on the ends of the mounting back plate. So we'll start by taking the screws and installing them into the inner hole on the mounting back plate. So we'll do each one here, and we'll just start with 1. Now we'll take one of these covers and slide it underneath the screw. That way it holds it in place. We'll do the same with another one. Just push it in until it clips into place fully. Do it again with the 3rd one. Push that side in place. And then do it with the very last one. Push that one in place. And there we go, the back plate is ready to be installed, so we'll go ahead and install this. Okay, so now we have the case back here up on the table. Now you can take the back plate, and just to install it, you just insert those 4 screws into the 4 holes on the motherboard, and there we go, it's sitting in place. Now we're going to leave this case the way it is, and we're going to move it out of the way. And now we're going to start working with the CPU liquid cooler pump assembly, because we're going to get that ready to install onto the CPU. So let's move this off the table and put the liquid cooler on the table now. Okay, so here we have the CPU water block pump assembly, and these 2 brackets install onto the side, just something like this, and they have 2 screws. And you just want to take each one of the screws and install it into place. Again, these only need to be snug, they don't need to be really tight onto the liquid cooler. Okay, so now we can install the liquid cooler CPU water block onto the top of the CPU. But before we do that, we have to install thermal compound. So just place it right in the middle of the CPU and put a little sized amount, just like a pea-sized amount, onto the top of the CPU. And there we go, we have thermal compound applied, and that will spread across the top of the CPU when the water block is placed on top. Now we'll take the CPU water block and we'll just line it up with the 2 pins, or the 4 pins on the back plate, those screws. Now you can take the 4 included thumb screws and start screwing them into place to basically secure the water block onto the top of the CPU. Okay, so now the CPU water block is mounted onto the top of the CPU, and we got the 4 screws snugly tightened into place. And now you can take the CPU water block 3-pin fan connection. Well, it's basically not a fan connection, it's just utilizing a fan connector. And that basically powers the pump. So we'll take it and plug it in to a fan header on the motherboard. And there we go. That connection is plugged into place. Now the water block, it will be powered when the system is turned on. Now let's go ahead and mount the radiator onto the front of the case. So let's go ahead and remove these 2 front fans that are here, these 2 pre-installed 120mm fans. We're going to go ahead and take these and put them onto the top of the case. I'm going to install them to the top so they are exhaust fans, and these fans are going to act as the intake. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now we got the liquid cooler right here, and we have the radiator specifically, and we're going to line it up with the mounting points on the front of the case. We have both of those 120mm fans removed. Now we can go ahead and take the 8 included screws for mounting the radiator. They're just these short fine threaded screws that will screw into the radiator and basically help hold it in place. Okay, so now we're going to install our EVGA GTX 960. This is the AC 2.0 version. And the first thing we're going to do to install it in place is we're going to lift up on this retention lever, or whatever it is that's securing these slot covers in place, and we're going to remove these 2 front slot covers. Just pull up on them and remove them from the case. And now we'll take our GPU, push back on this retaining lever, and make sure it's open on the slot that you're going to install the video card into. Take the GPU and line it up in the slot. Make sure the gold connector is lined up in the slot, just as the same as the RAM, and then push it into place. You should hear it like kind of snap or just seat into place. Now you should take this cover and clip it back into place, and that secures the GPU into place. Now it's plugged into the motherboard. Now let's go ahead and hook up all the power cables. So this includes the GPU power, motherboard, and hard drives. Okay, so now we're back at the rear of the case. This is the back half of the case. As you can see, we have a lot of power supply cables here, but this is pretty simple to install. And all you do is you start with the biggest cable here. So this is the 24-pin main motherboard power cable right here. As you can see, it's got 20 pins plus an extra 4. And we're going to push it through one of these grommets. Plug it into the motherboard, so we'll choose this one over here. And we'll just move every extra cable out of the way. And just simply push it through till it comes through on the other side, just like that. You don't need to go all the way through. And now we'll take the next cable that we'll need, which is the 8-pin for the CPU. Actually no, we'll do the GPU power right now. So we got the GPU power right here. It's 2 8-pins, but we're only going to be using a single 8-pin. And we'll push that through this grommet right here. Push that all the way through, and we'll grab the CPU power as well, which is right here. So the 8-pin for the CPU power is actually installed up here in the very corner, so you will need to remove this hard drive cage again, so make sure that is out of your way. I recommend to put that in last, that way it's out of your way the entire time during your build. And we'll just push it through this top hole up here, and we'll cable manage this here shortly. And the rest of the cables we can just leave back here for now. Now we'll go ahead and flip the case over. We'll take our 8-pin for our GPU power, and we'll simply connect the 6 to it so it becomes an 8-pin. And then we'll plug it into the GPU just like this. Push it straight on, and then we'll cable manage that after and make it look cleaner. And we'll now take our 24-pin, which is coiled up in the GPU power, plug it straight onto the motherboard. Now the 24-pin is installed. Now we're going to take our 8-pin for the CPU power and orient this one correctly. Attach both of them together, and there we go. That 8-pin for the CPU power is now installed. There are SATA connections right down there at the very bottom of the board. I'm going to take this connection, and it's L'd, so you can plug it in only one way. Take this connection and plug it into a port at the bottom of the board. There we go. You'll hear it click into place kind of with these newer SATA cables. And now we'll just take the cable and push it through the grommet so it comes out at the back side of the case. So as you can see right here, here's our SSD. And we'll take this L side of the cable and we'll plug it into the SSD. And it only goes in one direction, so you gotta just make sure you plug it in properly, just like that. And now we'll take a SATA power cable. We got plenty on this 600 watt power supply. Just take any one of those cables or connectors and plug one into the back of the SSD. Next cables we're going to install are the front panel connections. Go ahead and route this through a port here, or route this through a grommet on the back of the case. Okay, so now we got the case flipped over once again. We got the USB 3 cable right here, and we're just going to take that and we're going to take one side and plug it right into the motherboard, and it's got a notch on it so you can only plug it in one direction. And we also have the front panel power LED, reset switch, hard drive LED, all those cables like this. We're going to plug those in, and we also got the HD audio, or just the audio connections on the front of the case. We'll take this wire and route it through the bottom, and we'll plug it into the port on the motherboard that is for the HD audio. Okay, so now the front panel connections are all installed. The power LED, reset button, power button, and the hard drive LED. Now we can go ahead and flip the case over to the other side. And in this liquid cooler, or included with this liquid cooler, is a fan hub. And this motherboard doesn't have enough fan connections. It only has an extra fan connection for a rear fan, or just a fan wherever it is in your system. And that's not enough. We have 4 connections that are needed. So we got this fan hub with the liquid cooler. It's got a 4-pin connection on this side, so you plug this into the motherboard, and you can plug up to 4 fans with this adapter. It comes with the Deepcool Maelstrom 240T liquid cooler, and we're just going to stick this somewhere in the case. I'm just probably going to locate it down here. It's got a piece of adhesive on the back so it can stick to the inside of a case. Just going to push it onto the back of the case like that. Okay, so now we have the fan connection here on the other side of the system, and we're going to take it and plug it in to the fan connection right there. And there we go. Now we have the fan hub adapter that will power those 4 fans, these 2 on the liquid cooler, and also these 2 front ones, or these 2 top ones. This piece, which is the hard drive, or the 3.5-inch hard drive bays, and we can install it back in here now. Drop it down, and it kind of has a rail that it goes into. Now we can take this thumb screw and thread that into place. We'll take this very back cover, which comes off, and we'll install that. Just thread it into place just like that. And there we go. We're pretty much done now. Now we'll just put the side panels back on. Okay, so the system is ready for a test boot. We got it plugged in here. We got all the side panels on. Everything's plugged in, and we can go ahead and press the power button. And it sounds like everything's working here. Just turn it a little bit here so you guys can see it. So there we go. The system is working, and it boots up and it works. All the power is going to every component. As you can see, the 2 front fans are lit up, and also the light on the liquid cooler top fans are working. I can feel the air coming out there. GPU looks like it's working as well. I can feel the air on the back of the GPU. And obviously the power supply is working. So that's about it for this video on how to build a PC utilizing the Corsair Carbide Air 240 case. But if you guys like this video and you found it helpful and it helps you build a PC, it's a pretty simple process, really easy to do once you know how to do it. If you guys like this video, hit the thumbs up button and get subscribed for new videos.